Hello, welcome to the Postscript Shorts. My name is Jeff Grasher, and I am sitting here with my wife, Kylie Grasher. And this is a series in the Postscript where we interview Bible Institute students, and we just kind of get to know who are the folks that are in the Living Faith Bible Institute. And so for this episode, we've actually got a very special guest, and she's sitting right here in my office, and that's because she's my wife. She's definitely my favorite LFBI student, but she's actually an LFBI grad. So she and I graduated at the same time a few years ago, and so she went through the Bible Institute and stayed up late to write the papers, and she did that whole journey. But then she's now on the other side of graduation. She's helping support the institute by being a TA. So she is a teacher's assistant, and I'm going to let her tell her story. I'm not just going to, that would be the husband. No, that'd be the wife thing to do, right? To just speak for the. Sorry, no. So, welcome to the show, Kylie Grasher.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to ask you some questions and let you talk.
All right.
So, Kylie, let's just start with who you are. You're my wife, but what does that mean? I mean, what else do you do? What else is your role in the church that we go to, Midtown Baptist Temple?
Yeah. Well, I serve in youth ministry, and that is pretty much what I do. I'm a part of Mom's Group, and I help Cheryl Miles lead that at MBT. But for the most part, I just serve alongside Jeff in youth ministry, and then I serve by being his helpmeet at home with our kids. So that's a vital role that frees him up to be able to do what he does. And so with the youth, that's Sunday mornings every week. I get to hang out with them, and then every other Tuesday. And we do hangouts on those nights while the rest of the church does corporate prayer. So we do a devotion and some praise, and then play some games with them, get to know them. And we do some Bible studies and some hangouts during the month. And then I also mentor a young lady. And that's a series of lessons very similar to discipleship. And we meet twice a month. And one of those is a time to spend time together. And then the other is a time to go through a lesson and see how the Word of God can apply to a teenager's life. So that is in a nutshell what I do.
That was the youth ministry stuff. What's Mom's Group? What does that mean?
Mom's Group is a Bible study. It's a group of ladies that meet together a couple times a month on the first and third Thursday. And we walk through the Bible together, small passages, doing Discovery Bible Method. And then we have guests come in and teach about specific topics. So some of them are very practical, like how to organize your home and schedule. And then some of them are more spiritual, like what does a settled woman of God look like? And so I help with kind of the administration side of that and whatever Cheryl needs me to do. But I love that group. It's, I think, essential to have other people alongside who struggle with the same things, or who have, gone on to be past that struggle and can look back and tell you what worked for them and what Bible verses inspired them. And then people who are coming up behind who are just entering that stage that you're in. So kind of this like chain link of ladies who can support each other through the grueling days. They're joyful too, but, of momhood.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Okay. So you're a mom of 4 girls.
Yes.
7 years old to 9 months or so. But I don't really want the audience to know this, but you graduated with your master's like before I graduated with even my bachelor's. So like you're smarter than me.
That's very nice of you.
But they probably knew that. If they know us, they probably knew that already.
Well, you think that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the point being, you're super intelligent, you're highly qualified, you're a go-getter, you're organized. I mean, you're educated and all that. And then, we get married, and then you finish school and stuff, and then you're like conversationally at least bilingual, like just a sharp lady. And now your job is to stay at home all day with small children that are constantly screaming at you.
Yeah.
How's that?
Well, I mean, sometimes they talk in normal tones, but there is some screaming involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So think about this.
Well, and you're a Bible Institute grad. Like you went through the whole, like you have all these degrees and things, and they stay at home.
I do.
What's that like?
Well, if everybody would train up their children and raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, then every other ministry would actually just be supplemental. Like if everybody was a believer and they trained up their kids to love the Lord and serve him, then everybody would be believers. And so, in its very deepest essence, like parenting is the biggest form of obedience that you can do to disciple your kids, because then they can go out and outreach and evangelize and disciple others. But if everyone just did that one basic thing, then we'd be set. And so, some people may look at mothering or, in my case, I'm really blessed to be able to stay at home. Not everyone can do that, but I'm blessed enough to. And some people can look at that. And I used to even like grimace a little like, oh, I have this education and I have this experience and I'm going to stay home and wipe snotty noses and like cook mac and cheese all day. And
you had dreams. Things you wanted to do.
Well, now my dream is just that like every ounce of me can serve the Lord. Like, yeah, I had these ambitions and I wanted to travel and I had these thoughts of like, being an international church planter or something like that, but if God were to call me to that, I'd say yes. And the reason I know that is because I'm saying yes to wipe the snotty noses, like that's just where he has me right now. And so it has taken me a process to get there. Like I mean, I do have to surrender regularly. It's not like that's just like, hey, I love changing diapers. It's my favorite. I guess that's nobody's favorite. But if I am committed to honoring the Lord, whether you eat or drink or whatsoever you do all to the glory of God, then I know that whatever he does call me to, I'm going to be available to. And what better to use an LFBI education than just that basic obedience of every moment of the day? Like, let's say I worked at a computer most of my day. I could honor the Lord in every second of that with my attitude, with how I talk to my coworkers, being diligent. Like I can honor God in that way. But being a stay-at-home parent, every single interaction I have with my children is an opportunity to obey. It's an opportunity to apply that education from servant leadership. I can apply that I am going to serve my kids by laying down what I want to do. I want to finish this book that I'm reading, or maybe I want to just sit on the couch for a few minutes, or maybe I want to go exercise. But if I can be a servant leader to them and apply what I learned in that LFBI class, then I'm glorifying God and being a good example to them. I have to be consistent with discipline. Like that's been something that has been on my heart is I just have to be, I have to be on it so that they see that there's a consequence for sin, so that will lead them to the Lord someday, to see that the sinfulness of sin. And so that's very much a servant leadership position to take. Evangelism. So what do you learn from that class? Well, you learn how to meet people where they're at, how to ask them questions and lead them to the gospel. And I mean, who better to do that on than your own kids? And so I could go through any of these classes and just line it up with, no matter where you are, you can apply it. And for me, that's being at home with my kids. And then I get the privilege also of using those principles in the youth ministry or with moms I meet at the park. I just invited a lady yesterday that I ran into. So I hope she comes tomorrow. I don't know if she will, but, first and foremost, that's got to be in my home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the goal is we're trying to train up our children and raise them to love and obey and to follow the Lord. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about, that investment was made into you from your parents who are like the, in my mind, the prime example of how I want to raise children. And so they've done it, and you were born again at a young age. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can talk about that. Like you grew up in a home that maybe had a rocky start when you were really tiny, but then your parents got on fire for the Lord and were discipled and started raising you. And so maybe talk about your salvation.
Bringing and salvation. Yeah. Well, all I ever remember is a home that loved the Lord. My parents consecrated their lives to Christ. They were saved probably before that, but they really dedicated their lives to Christ in discipleship in like 92 or 93 or something. So I was young enough to not remember much before that. And so all I remember is growing up, and my parents loved God. Like I'd come out of my room and my mom would be sitting in the chair with her coffee and her Bible. That's every day what I saw, so that's what I grew up with. And I loved God. I didn't know what it meant to make decisions based on the Bible until about middle school. And that's kind of my dad always calls it an altar of lordship. So your soul is saved, but that moment when you decide that Jesus is the boss of your life, that altar to lay down, that was around 6th grade. And so that's when I decided that even if I didn't have friends at school, or even if there was no one around me who loved God, God was enough for me, and I was going to live for Him anyway. And so that's that altar for me. And then moving on from there, after that big decision, it was a series of little decisions, some that took me further from the Lord, but most that drew me closer. And my family moved around quite a bit, but we landed in Kansas City when I was 15, and I loved being a part of, at the time, KCBT, which morphed into being a part of Midtown Baptist, which was just a Kansas City Baptist Temple Midtown Bible Study, I think is KCBT Midtown was just what we called it. And so that was a Sunday night Bible study for a year, and then changed to Sunday mornings. And I was the only teenager there. And so I had to kind of dive into the deep end there of, all right, well, I'm still going to do things the Lord's way, even if this really stinks sometimes. But then getting to, grow up at Midtown in my faith, that just was so amazing. I know that the Lord is moving in our church because I've seen it from the beginning, and I've had the privilege of being a part of it. And so, man, I just love our church. I love the people there, and really appreciate getting to be a part of it.
Yeah. You were in LFBI from the beginning.
Yeah.
When it was
deeper on Sunday nights.
Mm-hmm.
It was like D2, but you just kept going. You never ended. It was just like class after class after class. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you were in LFBI for almost 10 years.
Yeah. Basically out of diapers into LFBI.
Yeah. So you've seen quite a lot of the different stages of the school as it's developed. And so maybe even in that time, you've taken, you've referenced some of the classes that stand out to you, but maybe you can talk about how maybe some of them that stood out to you as most impactful along the way, or maybe a favorite class.
Sure. There's a few that I've loved. I remember sitting in the sanctuary to do church history, and I had my friends next to me who were fairly new to following Christ, and just getting to be a part of that with them made that class so sweet. So, if you can take a class with a friend and go in person together and just grow through that together, that made it very memorable to me. And I enjoyed that class a lot. I've loved missions. I've loved, Revelation was great. Greg Axe is really funny to me. I enjoy his teaching style just because it's so different. And, but my very favorite class is probably the evangelism class. And that is also actually the reason that my favorite Postscript episode is what it is. Okay. Because it's Clifford Brian Clark. Did you know his first name was Clifford? Brian Clark's first name is Clifford. I just learned that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
I believe so.
I don't know if you're supposed to air that out there.
I'm sorry.
Now everyone knows.
Oh, well, I don't think it's a secret.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't know it. Well, anyway, okay, Pastor Brian, whose first name may or may not happen to be something different. So Pastor Brian Clark, he is one of my favorite preachers because he's so real. So, he tells this story both in the class and in the Postscript episode of him and his fledgling missionary work in London. And he said that he'd tried a bunch of different things. They'd tried dinners, and there would be tables of food left because no one would come. And he tried door-to-door evangelism, knocking on the door. And he tried setting a table of coffee out, and just invited people as they were walking by to come get a free coffee. And he was going to invite them to, I think it was Bible study. And he said his neighbor grabbed one, but everybody else just walked by his free coffee to go buy coffee at a coffee shop. And he just said, it was discouraging. Nothing was working. And so he decided to go do cold evangelism, to go out into the street and ask people just, do you have a minute to talk about Jesus? Who is Jesus to you? And he said the first time that he went out to do that, he just sat on a park bench for a few hours and then went home. And that story, that's one of the reasons that class and that Postscript episode are my favorite, because we all are that. Like, I mean, I'm scared to talk to people. And so I remember that story and think, okay, well, so is he. And so we can do this. I can do it. It's supposed to be scary. It's spiritual warfare. Yeah. If it wasn't scary, it wouldn't be real. It wouldn't be this eternal spiritual heavy thing, so just his being real. And he's hilarious. If you haven't listened to that Postscript episode, I highly recommend it. It's 20 something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I should have looked at it before, but it's a good one.
No, it's easy to find. Yeah, that's good. Well, this is probably the easiest interview I've done yet.
Yeah, I basically didn't stop talking the whole time.
That's perfect. That's great. I think that the viewer appreciates that. I think you've got a great perspective. I appreciate, obviously, your perspective, how hardworking you are and diligent you are in our home and with our children, and just the example that you are to other people, that you're going to do even if it's hard and it's not this big romantic, awesome work, even if it's not international missions, you'll follow me,
yes, yeah,
into the high schools and middle schools.
And I love it. I love this ministry. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us thanks for joining me for the interview. I appreciate it. Yeah. And thank you guys for hanging out with us. Again, favorite LFBI student. And I think just a joy to have with us. And I think a unique perspective, and one that probably actually isn't so unique. There's probably a lot of you who are watching this, and maybe you're in LFBI and you've got, responsibilities at home, and you can relate. And I hope this is an encouragement to you. That's the goal, is that we would be able to be an encouragement to you and a refreshment for you, just to know that, man, God's going to use you if you have to stay at home all day with children, or if you're going to be like, Brian Clark, who goes across the world to see souls saved. And so thanks again for joining us. If you would, you can check out LFBI.org and view the school, see if there's a spot for you, a place for you, a class for you. And we want to help get you connected there. And you can join us as we follow the Lord and get trained and equipped. And that would be awesome. And so until the next time, God bless, and we'll see you when we see you.
Thanks for listening to the Postscript. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a rating and review in order to help other people find our podcast. If you value this show, please help us continue creating content by supporting Living Faith Bible Institute at lfbi.org/support.